Wes here. Thanks for joining me today. I was not expecting to make a video. In fact, I am camping and fishing, not necessarily catching, in northern Minnesota and having a great time. But guess what? I found some clay. At least I think I've got clay, and I'll show that to you in a moment. And then directly behind me is Canada. It's not more than a half a mile that way. So we're about as far north as you can get. And actually, we know that Native Americans built pottery here. They had a pottery tradition. It's kind of different than the Southwest. And so I found clay. And, you know, it's amazing. When you start looking around, there's clay everywhere. So let me show you what I found. This is the trail down from the camp to the water. You have to boat here to be able to camp here. All the campsites are on islands or water access. So there's our boat. I'll show you the clay. So down here next to the water, it is wet. And look at this stuff here. Nice and slippery, gooey, sticky, kind of green. So here is the bank. It looks to me like there's clay all the way up the trail here. So this is the stuff that I'm going to collect. You can see how this is all kind of fragmented, breaking apart. I don't have a tripod, so I just have to scoop this in by hand. Okay, here it is. I have enough here to take home, get processed, hopefully turn into something that'll be kind of fun. I'll let you know. Just so you know what is going to go on with the rest of this video, I am going to wet process this clay. That's called levigation. So I'm taking dirty, rough, wild clay and turning it into clean clay where I can make something out of it. Then I will make a couple of test tiles and a little bowl that has a coil on it. And I will go over a variety of things that I look at to determine whether clay is usable or not. Because quite frankly, most wild clay isn't that great. I will drive those things. We're going to get it in my little electric kiln and then see what the final outcome is and evaluate all of that. Hopefully that is something that is useful to you. So let's keep going. Here is the clay. I never expected to find clay on a rocky island quarter of a mile or so from Canada, but here it is. And so just for fun, I'm going to show you how I process it and test it, and maybe I can turn it into a bowl. But let's get this thing processed. First thing you want to do is make sure that your clay is dry, because we're going to get it wet and turn it into a slurry. If you have big chunks of wet clay, it'll just kind of never dissolve. It'll just drive you crazy. So get it in smaller pieces, put it in a bucket, make sure it's dry, and then we're going to add some water. I should say, why am I doing this? Well, the idea of processing clay, especially wild clay, is you really don't know what's in it. There's probably sand, maybe some pebbles, some just regular old dirt, certainly a lot of organic material. I just soon get all of that out of there so I have reasonably pure clay that I can then test and work with. So the first step, get it good and wet, and so I can turn it into a slurry. The reason this process works is because clay is the tiniest particle in dirt. All the other things in dirt, the sand and the loam, all the other stuff is bigger. And what will happen is we stir all this up, the clay will get in suspension of the water. Everything else, if we just give it a little time, will sink to the bottom. And so we just pour off all that suspended clay into a separate bucket. Eventually we'll let that settle down, pour off the water, but the clay will settle down to the bottom. So that's called levigation, and that's what we're going to do. The clay has been sitting in this bucket, so it should be all absorbed pretty well. So we're going to move it from this bucket to this bucket. And I have a screen here to catch organic material. The idea here is get this stirred up really good so all that clay is suspended in the water. We're not going to get it all in the first pour. We will have a few pours here. This doesn't have to be a perfect process, but getting it stirred up good. I just wait a little bit. This is probably long enough. The sand should sink to the bottom. And just pour it into the other bucket. But you stop pouring before you start to get the stuff on the very bottom. However, there's some more clay there. I'll show you how to get that as well. All this organic stuff, we just throw away. There's more room in my bucket, so I'm going to add some more water to this, stir it up again. Once again, stir up all the clay. I can feel it on the bottom. Get it suspended. Give it just a little time. We'll pour it in with the other clay. Again, catching some of this organic material and stopping before we start pouring out all the sludge that's in there. I might do this another time, but this is all the leftover stuff, and I can feel that it is kind of gritty. Clay ought to be real slick and smooth and tiny, tiny particles. So there's a little bit of fine-grained sand in here. This is not clay. There's a little bit of clay left there, but most of this is just dirt and stuff that we really don't want as part of our clay. I'll show you the next step. We'll pour off the water and keep the clay that's on the bottom. We'll do that in a few hours, probably tomorrow. This is the leftover waste material at the bottom of the bucket. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's gritty. There's a little bit of sand in it. It's certainly not smooth and silky like you would expect clay to be. There's a little clay left in it, but not very much. Most of this is just dirt and fine sand, and that'll all be thrown away. This is the water with the clay. The clay settled to the bottom. The amount of time it takes to go to the bottom really varies. Sometimes as little as an hour, sometimes overnight or more. So this has been setting quite a while. And the goal is just to pour off all the water, which will all be thrown away. Pour it off slowly so the clay on the bottom doesn't get disturbed. We want to get rid of as much water as we can. We'll lose a little bit of clay, but not very much. Still, you can see a fair amount of organic material there, but that's not a big deal. Okay, before we start losing our clay, we stop. Then this water just gets thrown away. The challenge now is to dry this clay out, and it can take a while. There's a couple options. One thing that works pretty well for me is to use an old pillowcase. Put it in a bucket. I'm also going to try and use this screen to see if I can catch the clay this way to let it dry a little more quickly. Let's see how it goes. So I get this kind of stirred up as best we can. Here's the clay. It's nice and silky and smooth. We should all the rough stuff, the sand and whatnot, hopefully is out of here. Most of it is. It's good enough for what we want to do. So there's still a lot of water in this pillowcase. One option is just to let it sit and evaporate, but that would take forever. Here's the clay. It sat outside in that pillowcase and dried out. It's still very wet. It's very sticky, very creamy. Have no idea whether it's going to be any good or not. So I think what I'm going to do right now is add temper to it. And a good starting place for temper is 20%. An easy way to do that is to divide your clay into 4 pieces and replace one of those pieces with your temper. In this case, I'm using sand. This is an inexact thing. Don't worry about it too much. But it looks to me now that I have about 5 pieces. 4 pieces of clay and 1 piece of sand. Each of those would represent 20%. Should be about right. It's real hard, I think, to measure temper when you start with wet clay. It's easier when it's dry. So now it's just a matter, the sticky business of mixing it all together. The beauty of having the temper in it now is that it will help this clay dry. Clay just all by itself, it is just so dense that it doesn't dry very easily. But once the temper is in, it will dry more quickly. And then I can get on with testing this stuff. The clay has been sitting for a while. It's dried out quite a bit. It's kind of a nice consistency. So one of the ways of testing clay is to make a little rope or a coil and twist it around your finger. Does it break? And this is pretty good. So this clay is pretty plastic. I think it has a good potential for actually being a buildable clay. So let's go to the next test. And I want to test to just see how much shrinkage there is. So I've rolled out the clay. And then I have a cookie cutter with a known size. I've measured it. It's 2.6875 inches. And so I just cut out a little disc. I will label it. I will dry it and then fire it. And then I can measure the final size compared to this size, and I can calculate then the shrinkage. And ideally, it doesn't have huge shrinkage. It'll be easier to work with. 10% is kind of common. So this will take a little while to dry, but that is the next step. I made a little bowl and put one coil on it just to see what that was like. This turns out to be really workable clay. Not only is it pretty plastic, but it has good wet strength. In other words, it's not floppy. It holds its position once you put it there. So that's good. This will get cleaned up a little bit more, but dry and put in my electric kiln to see what happens. All the rest of the clay went into a plastic bin, and it's all labeled, so I know what I have for the future. The test tiles and the little bowl that I made are all dried, ready to go. So let's get them in the kiln and see what the end result is. This little test kiln has been really handy for this kind of thing. So I've got the temperature set for 800 degrees. And all I have to do is pop the little samples or test tiles inside. Close it up. In about an hour, this will heat up to 800 degrees. I'll let it sit that way for just a little bit, and then we will see what the outcome is. Our pottery has cooled now, so let's check it out. Here we go. Here's our little pot and our test tiles. Everything fired good. There's no cracks or anything like that. And I expected it to be pretty orange color. There's just a lot of iron in Minnesota. So it looks like it's pretty good, but I've got a little bit more testing that I want to do. Some pottery, when it's fired, is just not that strong. So I made an extra little tile. I don't have a good objective way of measuring strength, but this broke pretty hard. So this is seeming to be a good, strong pottery, and I don't see any carbon core in there or anything. But I think this is great pottery. One more thing that I want to check out. If clay has calcium in it or limestone, it can cause your pottery to spall. So one way to test that is to take some of the dry clay and add vinegar to it and see if it bubbles up. And guess what? It doesn't. Now, I have a lot of trouble with this with clay that I pick up near my home, but in this case, this looks great. I wanted to test how much shrinkage there was in the clay. So this is the cutter I used to make the tile. Here is the tile after being fired. It easily fits inside the cutter. It shrunk, and we'd always expect that. How much? Well, this is a drawing of these two pieces. The cutter is 7 centimeters in diameter. The tile 6.2 is the final measurement. And so there was 11.4% shrinkage in the clay. That is certainly a reasonable and acceptable amount. Well, the question is this good clay? Would I want to use it? And the short answer is yes, and here is why. First of all, it's plastic. It molds easily. It is easy to work with, and when you put it in a position, it stays there. So it has good wet strength. And then once it's fired, it seems to be good and solid and strong. And so there's no problem with any of that. Shrinkage, very reasonable, a little over 11%. That is certainly not a problem. So, and I tested it with vinegar. Apparently there is no calcium in this. So that's always good news for me. Two things that I think are a little bit downside. One, the color. I'm not crazy about having orange clay, but you know, it is really kind of a pretty color for sure. I usually want like a buff color or something. The other bigger issue is that I have to drive that way 300 miles to begin with, then jump in a boat, go another hour to an island to get this stuff. Definitely not convenient. But overall, this has been a good experiment and hopefully something that is useful to you. I am filming the end of this video long before the video is over. I have no idea how it will end. But I do know that I like to end these videos wishing you health, happiness, peace, and love. And I can't think of a better place to do that. This is a glorious place. It is so beautiful. It's so close to my heart. I try to get up here every year, and I wish you could be here as well and just experience just how magnificent this world really can be. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And until next time, this is Wes, wishing you health, happiness, peace, and love. Take care. Bye-bye.